Over the last year or so, I've enjoyed working on some scratch build RC airplanes from FliteTest.com, and I just wanted to put together a little video with some of the tips and techniques that have helped me make these faster and better. And it's as much a video for me just to remind myself if I come back in a few months how I did everything, but I figured I'd share it as well. And what I want to focus on is modifying the plans that Flite Test provides for all of their designs, and just be able to show how to reduce the amount of paper you need to use if you're printing this yourself, reduce the cutting you need to do, just make it easier and faster to put together. And it's also customizable, so there's a lot of talk on the Flite Test forums about scaling some of these designs, doing 150% Spitfire, scaling up some of the minis, for example, and if you want to do that, you can use these same techniques to do that. So I'm gonna walk through first some of the problems that I had with my initial builds, some of the programs that I use to make it easier, and then I'm gonna do a step-by-step walkthrough on modifying the FT Mini Scout plans, so that'll hopefully demonstrate it well. And just for background on how I do these scratch builds, I just use normal printer paper, print out the plans on 8.5 by 11, cut them out, overlap them, tape them together, and then cut out each of the template pieces. And I put tape around the borders so they're a little bit more resilient. And that's just part of what I like to do. I know a lot of people like to go to Kinko's and print stuff out themselves there, and cut from there. I just like doing as much of the process as I can by myself. It's also slightly cheaper depending on how much you value your time, but I just work on these things during my free time, and I enjoy putting together plans as much as building, and actually almost as much as flying. So my first plane was the FT Flyer, and I know that's a first plane for a lot of people. And the first thing I looked at to do that was where did they go? The tiled plans. And pretty much off the bat I knew that I was not going to be able to use these. Stuff goes all the way to the edge, which my printer can't do. And when you try to print it, it does weird things with the scaling, 102%, but then it's backed off from the edges, and I just wasn't sure exactly what was going on, and I didn't want to run into any issues or problems. So I moved to the full plans, which are here. And I think as a lot of people who do it this way know, you can use Adobe Reader to kind of print this in a poster form, cut them out and tape them together. And so that's what I did. Just go up here to print, and as you can see, it prints out like this. It has little cut marks, which are useful for cutting off edges, so you can have a little bit of overlap to tape them together. But there are also some issues. So as you can see here, the FT Flyer wing, which is 26 inches across, and I think it's something like 16 inches deep, is on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there might even be a little bit of an 8 right here. The horizontal stabilizer is on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Vertical is on 1, 2, 3, 4 sheets. Part of the fuselage is on 4, and all of these can be on fewer sheets. So the vertical stabilizer could maybe even be on 2. This could definitely be on 2. but there's no real way to modify that. And so I just printed it as it was, put it together, taped it together, and it took quite a long time to do that. So when I wanted to start my second project, the Spitfire, you go to the full plans again. This time it's on 2 sheets. So you're looking at 32 pieces of paper that you're printing. And when I go to do that, again, you run into a bunch of the same problems. So, this part of the turtle deck is on 4 sheets. The fuselage is on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's a little bit there. Each of these little formers has been cut down the middle, and so you've got these tiny pieces that are in 2 sheets. And same goes for the wing. You got a little bit over here, a little bit over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sheets of paper for the wing, 4 for the vertical stabilizer. And at this point I decided, there's got to be a better way. I've got to figure out some other way to do this. And so when you listen to some of the podcasts and watch some of the videos, you realize that Josh, and I guess David in this case, but Josh puts together his plans in Corel, which is a vector-based graphics editor. And there's a free version of that called Inkscape, which you can use on Windows, Mac, and Linux. I have a Mac, and just as a little bit of a caveat, I think because it wasn't initially developed for the Mac, you need this program or this architecture called X11, which apparently, as of the last few revisions of Mac OS X, is not rolled into OS X anymore, and so you need to install it separately. And initially, I'm on Yosemite, which is the most recent Mac OS X release. Initially, I had some problems with either X11 or Inkscape, but it all worked out. Hopefully, if you're on Windows, it's even easier. And if you're on Linux, then normally you know what you're doing better than I do. And then, so I learned a little bit on how to use Inkscape, and I'm going to demonstrate that later. And so I put together a modified version of the Spitfire plans. And just as a for example, I've only pulled up the wing and horizontal stabilizer, but you can't tell, but this I think it's only 6 sheets of paper with the wing fitting on 5 sheets as opposed to the 9 that I told you earlier. Vertical stabilizer is only on 1 sheet, and so I thought, well, that's great. I figured out how to do it. But then when you try to print it in Adobe Reader, it still, for some reason, adds all this extra space around the edges that isn't even part of the picture. And no matter how you try to change it, it doesn't work. Now you can see here clearly this will fit down in this corner. If you just move it several inches over and several inches down, this will fit all on one page. But it still wasn't fixing my problem. This is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 sheets. So I looked at a bunch of programs and found one called MindCAD Tiler, which is, I believe it's Mac only, but this is on the App Store. It is $5, but that's a great price to pay for how much easier this makes putting together these plans. In terms of PC or Windows compatible similar PDF tiling programs, I haven't been able to test them, but one of the ones that popped up, I think, has been used or mentioned at least on RC Groups, was called PDF Tiler from noliturbare.com, and it seems like it does about the same thing. I haven't been able to test it, like I said, but it's worth checking out, and I'm sure there are other PDF tiling programs available. But what that enabled me to do was to open Minecad Tiler, and I'm going to open up those Spitfire plans that I made. Choose my printer, and then you pick scale to actual size, which scales it up to the number of pages that it was designed for. And as you can see, we haven't quite solved the problem yet. For some reason, it still adds extra space. This is still spread out over 8 pages. It's a little better than what Adobe Reader was doing, but in this case, you actually have the ability to change orientation and to add or delete rows and columns, which is fantastic. So I designed it for what I think this is 25.5 by 22 inches. Change that orientation and delete a row, and there you go. Fits on spectacularly. The one caveat is you got to go in. For some reason, it makes it 96% every time, and so you change that up to 100. Everything fits fine, and then you can print this off, put them together, and put them together a lot easier than the ones that are printed by Adobe. So with that kind of quick summary of how I did it and what I'm gonna do now, I'd just like to walk through the entire process for the FT Mini Scout. And I've actually already done it, but I'm gonna just walk through it again as a demonstration that'll hopefully enable you guys to do it yourselves. And these are the plans that Adobe will print out from the full set of plans for the FT Mini Scout. And this would entail a bunch of cutting, overlapping together, taping together, in multiple areas, and let's just kind of look at the issues that we're running into here. So we got this fuselage that's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. We've got this tiny piece that's in 4 pages. The wing is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. This wheel's been cut in half. The firewall and the control horns have been cut in half. The horizontal stabilizers on 1, 2, 3, 4. This is actually a little part right here, and that would be incredibly frustrating to tape together if we just tried to do it the standard way. So I'm going to show you how to move from here to here. This is basically the same scale of picture that I've taken, except we've got all the pieces together on 5 sheets as opposed to 16 sheets. I did cheat a little bit. I'm only printing out the wing once because it's really all you need in this design, I believe. There are some designs where the wings are not symmetrical, and so you might not be able to do that, but it's worth checking out. And besides that, all the pieces are here, and you only have cuts through what are absolutely necessary. So the horizontal stabilizer is in 1 piece. You cut that out once. The wing is only in 2. The fuselage is only in 2. This other kind of fuselage former piece is in 2, and everything else is in 1 piece. So that's going to make everything a whole lot easier. It's going to be a whole lot faster. You haven't printed out as much, wasted as much paper or anything like that. So yeah, I'm going to show you how I did that. So let me close these out, clean up my screen just a little bit, and actually don't need that either. I'll leave that open. So the first step is to open up, well, obviously you're going to want to download Inkscape, download X11, make sure that those work well, And I'm just going to go to my applications, open up Inkscape. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Again, I think that might be the result of it being in this weird architecture with X11 and whatnot. It also means that if you're working on the Mac, there are a couple weird things, like you don't do Command-Z to undo like you would in any other program. You use Control-Z, and just kind of odd things like that. But here we go. Here we are in Inkscape. I'm gonna open up. Let me see if it's a recent one. Nope. In my FT Scout folder, full-size plans. And here we have the full-size plans. I don't know why this piece is gone. Probably is just being covered up right there. Hopefully it's not too faint. But this is what I showed you printed out, that printed out in 16 pages. These are these have been put together in, like I said, in Corel, I believe, which is a vector graphics editor, which is the same sort of program that Inkscape is. Adobe Illustrator is similar. Photoshop and GIMP and those sorts of things are not really designed to do vector graphics editing. I believe you can, it just might not be as straightforward, and I certainly don't know how to do it, so I can't help there. But what the vector graphics essentially means is that all of these little components can be kind of broken out and modified individually. This isn't just a static picture like a JPEG or something. And the way that you kind of access that, right click and click ungroup. And it might be something you have to do a couple times, just depending on how things have been grouped together. There you go. I just had to click ungroup twice, and now each of these little pieces, usually it's all ungrouped, but sometimes you have, again, big groups within groups within groups, and so you might need to ungroup a few times. But as you can see, each of these little pieces has been ungrouped, and so I can do things like modify that. Obviously I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo it. But this is how we start editing. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to measure some of these long pieces. And you click over here on the measurement tool, and then you click and drag to see how long something is. Now what's this telling me? This is telling me it's 1482.81 pixels, which is entirely useless. This scale is in pixels, this scale's in pixels, and I don't know what to do with that. So I'm going to go to Document Properties and change the default unit from pixels to inches, which is a lot more useful. I'm going to change the size to inches too, just so I know. So this is the size of the, I guess, the laser printer at Flite Test, because I think that's what these are designed for, the laser printer. But now that it's in inches, I can see a lot better what I'm doing. So I'll do the same thing, click and drag, and we can see this is 16.42 inches. So that's going to take at least 2 sheets of paper, no matter how you slice it. The horizontal stabilizer, though, I'm seeing, well, that's 9.8 inches by 5 inches about. So that can fit on 1 sheet, okay? And that'll be great. Over here, the wing, so it looks like it's a little over 11.5, so that's gonna again have to be in 2 sheets. This one as well, 2 sheets, but otherwise, as I kind of showed you in that picture, everything else is gonna be able to fit on 1 sheet. So, but the first thing I want to do is probably do one of my 2-sheet plans. So this, I already forgot, it's 16 point something, and by something like 7 inches. So that's, I think that's going to fit on one 8.5 by 22 plan. So what I'm going to do is going to open up a new Inkscape document. Again, it's open in pixels, and there's probably a way to change the default permanently to inches, but I don't know what it is, so I got to do it every time. Which doesn't really matter because I'm going in here anyway to change the size of the sheet that I'm working in. So, like I said, two 8.5 by 11 sheets that are one on top of each other are going to be 8.5 by 22. And as you can see next to it, it has changed into exactly what I want. The only issue is, how do I make sure that when I'm organizing stuff on here, that nothing that doesn't need to crosses from one sheet to the other. And the way I do that is by creating a grid in another layer. If you're used to working in Photoshop or graphics editing software, layers are just kind of different areas that you can work in without affecting other layers. And so what I want to do is, let's add a layer above the current layer. I'm going to call it grid. I'm going to call it the grid layer. I'm going to add it, so now I'm working in the grid layer. This shows you down here which layer you're working in. It also shows you whether the layer is locked, which means whether or not it can be edited, and it shows you whether or not the layer is visible, which will become useful once we're exporting our final PDF documents. So I want to create a grid. I'm going to use this tool to create straight lines, which is exactly what I want to do. And there's a couple ways that you can create these lines. Again, this is an 8.5 by 22 sheet, starting from 0 up to 22 and 0 over to 8.5. And so I want to create a line basically across the 11-inch mark. And you can do that just by guessing, because this is a rough estimate anyway. Or you can be a little bit more exact and watch where on the y-axis you actually are placing your tool. So I'm at 10.95, move up a tiny bit, just a shade. So 11.02, that's probably about as close as I'm going to get, and that's plenty close. And then just draw the line straight across. And there we have it. You can make it as dark or as light as you want to, it doesn't really matter. This is just for repositioning our stuff. So what I want to do is I want to lock that layer with the grid and move back to layer 1. And so I'm going to move over here, make sure I'm using the select tool. And as I mentioned before, all this stuff is ungrouped, and so I need to make sure that I'm selecting everything that I want to in this piece. You know, this is the biggest piece that we have that I'm working with. Grab it all, copy, move over to this other one, right click and paste. So there we have it. As you can see, I dragged over this thing, which is fine. I'm probably going to leave that over here anyway. And I selected the wrong thing, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo it. But this is what I want to move, somewhere over here. So this is already looking a lot better. There's only one cut. It's going to print on 2 sheets. I'm going to be able to tape it together once, cut it out, and we'll be dandy. But I've also got all this other free space, where I'm already using this sheet. Might as well use as much of it as possible to try to fit all of the other small parts if I can. So I'm gonna copy and paste the firewall and control horns. Obviously, if you don't need to print those out, then that's even more space you're saving. Put that there. These formers, same deal. bring them over. These are for making the wings, I believe. Bring them over. Move them on. This is also used in creating the wing, I believe. Copy and paste. Let's see if I can fit these. These are the little kind of decorative slash barbecue skewer holding portions on the fuselage. Bring that over. Same thing with little corresponding pieces. Bring those over. You know, I might get pretty. I'm gonna try to do this as best as I can. Pack everything in. Part of the power pod, actually. Over here. So I've already done this, so I kind of know that all this stuff is going to fit, but it's kind of just trial and error. Copy, paste. Alright, so I did something I wish I hadn't done. By overlapping these things. Sometimes they can get you in a lot of trouble. Fortunately, that didn't work out. I mean, that didn't mess up, but here we are. Okay, so let's start trying to work with these right here and fit them in. So I've got some free space there. I'm going to put the control horns up here. I'm going to move this up the page as far as possible. You know, trying to leave a little bit of relief between pieces and the cut edge. You know, so that's half an inch. That's plenty. We'll move these up here. You can put them actually a lot closer to each other than to the edge. Move these, stuff them in there. Let's see if I can pack these over here. And maybe I can move that one actually closer. See about that right here. I'm getting to some of these bigger pieces. This one I'm going to fill in just down that side. Gonna move this. I'm kind of getting to the point. These might be able to fit in. They'd probably be okay, but I do want to demonstrate. So I think these would fit better rotated in, especially if I put this like that has to kind of be like in this orientation. So I'm going to rotate these pieces, just to kind of also show you all how to rotate it. We've got these handy rotate buttons. And so I'll click one of those, and perfect. Put you here. Same thing, I'm going to rotate you. And now we've run into a problem. When I rotated that, this piece fell out. And the reason that happens is because, you know, I'm not even really sure where the axis of the rotation is and where each of the pieces are, because we've ungrouped them, where they are relative to the rotation. So a lot of times, and especially you know, just to demonstrate, oops, grabbing the wrong one. If I were to select this whole thing and rotate it, you know, it's all over the place now. So obviously you don't want to do that. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to undo that. And the key thing you want to do when you're rotating is to group all the pieces in the piece that you're rotating back together. So you just right click, group them, and this time when you rotate it, it'll all stay together. So that was good, and you can leave it as a group or you can ungroup it. It doesn't really matter anymore. The ungrouping was really just to grab them from the other plans. And then this right here, Again, just to make sure I'm not impinging on the side of the page, I'm going to group it together, rotate it, and move it on. And so that is almost all of the small pieces, except for the wheels. That's the fuselage, and that's all on 2 sheets of paper. Right there. That's going to be a lot easier to cut out, to tape together. You're not going to have to tape together pieces that are so small they really don't need to be. You're not going to have 8 different pieces of the fuselage you're taping together, and that's really exactly what we're going for. So I'm ready to move this into a PDF document that I'm going to be able to print out. So let's, well, I almost forgot, we still have this grid line through the middle that was very useful for putting it together, but I don't particularly want the grid line printed on there. So now all you need to do is go to the grid layer, click on the little eyeball, and now it's invisible. I'm going to save it as a PDF right here, and I'm just going to call it drawing 1 since I've done this on the other drawings already. Save. You can change the options if you want. I think they're fine. And there we go. So I'm going to close that. It asks if you want to save it as a SVG. I don't, maybe you want to. Again, I've already done this, so I'm not going to. But let's take a look at it. It's in my Dropbox with the plans, drawing 1. And let's open it up with Adobe Reader, which is how we would print it traditionally. As you can see, this is exactly, I haven't changed any of the parts. They're just reorganized. If we try to print it, again, I have no idea why it does this. It changes, it changes the orientation. It's adding, it's making this on 4 pages, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's where MindCAD Tyler comes into play. So I would move over here. It always asks me for a printer. I don't know how to set my printer as the default, but I won't stress about it. Gonna open up some airplane plans, drawing 1 PDF, which is what I just made. Choose a printer. It's my inkjet. Sorry, my laser printer, which I highly recommend. Always begin by clicking actual size. It won't do it correctly. I'm not sure why, but I guess it thinks you need a lot more margin. So if you remember, I designed this for an 8.5 by 22. So it's in the correct orientation. All I need to do is delete a column and delete a row. And as you can see, everything fits in there really nicely. As I mentioned earlier, it changes the scaling to 96% for reasons, again, I don't know, probably just to, again, protect the edges. But even if you scale it up to 100, you can see that these margins, which are the printer margins, are not being encroached on. The printer will still be able to handle this fine, and you're ready to go. I'm not going to print it because I already have these printed out. But just to finish off the plans, I'm just gonna complete doing these plans as I've done earlier. So as I had shown, the wing is going to have to be on its own page. So this time, I think, instead of doing an 8.5 by 22, I'm going to do an 11 by 17, and I think that'll fit a lot more stuff on. but it's using the same technique. I'm going to create a new Inkscape document. I'm going to have to go through and change the settings again because it changes it back to pixels. I'm going to change it to inches. And I'm going to create an 11 by 17 inch piece of paper. Exit that. I'm going to create another grid line that's just going to be able to show where the sheets of paper are going to come together. I'm going to call it grid. And I'm going to draw my line, which I'm going to use, so I'm going, from 0 to 8.5, which is right about there. Looking in the corner to see exactly where I am. 8.51, 8.48, I guess that's okay. There we go. And so we have our line. And I'm going to, I want to stop here. I'll lock the grid and move to the other layer just so I'm not working all in the same layer. And what I have done is I've created templates in different configurations of just this blank document with grid lines. So in the Spitfire wing, like I said, it was a 5 sheet, so it was actually a 6 sheet 6 sheet size drawing with grid lines over it. And what I've done is I've just created these templates already, well, that's going to open it in, what's that going to open that in? Good, it's going to open in Inkscape. And so as you can see, this is the template for what I made the Spitfire wing in. And the Spitfire wing fits in these 5, and then you can throw up right here whatever you want to. And I've just saved this as, it's a 25.5 inch by 22 inch scalable vector graphics document, which is kind of the default for Inkscape. And so if I ever need to make something this big again, I don't need to go through and make the grid lines. I've already got this template open. I'll open up the template, I'll save it as another file. So, you know, if I'm making the Storch, I'll say, you know, Storch wing. I'll save it as, so that I've still got this template saved as its own file. And then I'm able to work in here. Same technique. Once you're done, you hide the grid lines using the eyeball and export to PDF. So if I was doing this for the first time, I would save this as an 11 by 17 SVG file, and then I would save it again as you know, FT Mini Scout drawings number 2. In this case, I'm just gonna grab one of the wings right there, copy, paste, and as you can see, I grabbed a few other random things. I'm going to delete those. That's nothing. And I want to move this down, probably, I don't know, right about there. And I think I can fit the whole, well, I'm being a little disingenuous. I know that I can fit the whole horizontal stabilizer in the top part of this document. So I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to paste it in. And as you can see, I brought over too much, so I'm going to delete those. And that's handy, but when I was working this before, I liked it better flipped about, I guess, 235 degrees or something, whatever that is. And so what you can do to rotate, if you want to rotate these by a non-standard rotation angle, you know, these are only 90 degrees, You can, where is this? Let me find this really quickly. I think it's in Object Properties, but I'm wrong. It's not there. Ah, I found it. It's in Transform. So in this Transform section, you can rotate by any angle you want. So let's do it 45 degrees first, see what happens. Great, that's pretty good, except I want it the other way around, and so from there I could just, do it. Well, I made that mistake again, didn't I? Is I have to remember to group everything together, and then I can rotate them around and move it exactly to where I want, which is right there. I'll come back to these in just a bit because they're useful if you want to modify or scale the plans as well. So at this point, I have almost everything I want. I'm going to bring this over, put it on the other side of the drawing. It'll fit nicely right there without having to rotate anything. And with that there, I can also fit the wheels in just so. I think only three will fit. Huh, it's not selecting the bottom one. There we go, only 3 will fit in the bottom, but that's fine. I'll put that right there. I'll put this one right here. And bam, gonna move to the grid, hide the grid, file, save as, save the drawing to, PDF, save, okay, and there we have it. I'm not gonna save this as an SVG. And all we have left is, so let's look at all these pieces. That, all of these, all of these, all of these. I'm only doing one wing, I'm cheating, but it wouldn't be too hard to do another one. All of this, so everything on this side, and the wing, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this are done with. So all I have is the poster board turtle deck thing and the vertical stabilizer. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to use the measuring tool just to check myself. So this, I think, will fit just on one sheet of paper. So I'm going to, well, before I grab it, I'm going to create a new Inkscape document. And in this case, it's only one sheet of paper. So I'm going to go in and make sure that it's an 8.5 by 11, which in this case is actually a standard document, a standard page size. And we're good to go from there. Don't need a grid. I'm just going to grab that poster board sheet, copy, paste, fits just in really nicely. Come over, grab the vertical stabilizer, paste it, and that's, that'd probably work, but just because I'm going to group it together, rotate, and move it in, and it fits nicely there. Save as, drawing3.pdf. And we're done. We've reduced this 16-page, incredibly frustrating to put together document into 5 pages. And I'm going to pull that up again just so I can show y'all what the difference is. This is what we started with. 16 pages of frustrating taping and cutting and everything. And this is what we ended with. Only 3 things that even need to be taped together at all, each of them only once, and everything else is just by itself, easy to cut out, and we're good to go. I will comment really quickly, because people might have the question. I'm going to open up MindCAD, which is how I print these things. I'm going to open up that first drawing that we did. Point it to my laser printer, which is not that one. Yeah, it is. Move it to actual size and do the same thing that I'd done before. Make sure that it's 100% scale. So this is a little close up here, but it's still within the document range. It's fine. If you really needed to, you could go back in, and this is where it might be useful to save it as an SVG. It might be quicker to go in, shift everything down, just, you know, a hair. You might feel better about yourself, but I know that it'll just be fine. I was worried initially about this section right here. Am I losing any data when I print it out? You know, is anything moving around or anything? But it's not. It is correctly kind of handling this overlap in about the same way that Adobe does with its overlap. If you're familiar with printing the poster style boards, poster style plans in Adobe. The one catch is that it doesn't have the cut marks in the corners that Adobe has, and I do find those useful, but they aren't totally necessary. In almost every situation, you'll have enough points to kind of make sure that you're cutting along the correct line, and it's really not an issue. If you really need to, once everything's printed out, put a ruler down across this whole section, draw a line to make sure that you're cutting everything out correctly, but otherwise it's okay. I've measured, I printed out you know, multiple copies of things and measured it manually after I printed out, and it came down, it was accurate to within, I don't know, something like 1/100th of an inch on the Spitfire wing, which is you know, 20 inches across. So that's well within the error of my measurement, and certainly won't change your plans or anything. So hopefully that's helpful for if you want to play with anything, want to just make everything easier. I do want to go in really quickly and just comment on how these same techniques are useful for if you're wanting to scale things. So obviously, when the minis came out, there was talk about scaling them up to kind of a regular size, quote unquote, and you can use some of these exact same techniques to do that. So let's say I want to scale, well, let's start with the wing, scaling just the wing up. Obviously, you're going to use the same technique on everything or on each item, but it's 12 inches, so if I want to make it 150%, it's going to be you know, roughly 18 inches, and well, 18 inches down, and then it's going to be 9 inches across. So this is an example of where you know, that might be a slightly frustrating length, because it looks like I might have to use three pages one way to do that. And so what I'd probably do in that situation is I'd do a 25.5 by 11 and fill in the other parts of the page with that. So, but let's just do that as an exercise. So I'm going to open a new document and but 25.5, by the way, is just 8.5 times 3, which is how I'm getting that number. So it's 3 8.5 across. But I should point out that for those of you who have access to bigger printers, or if you're wanting to bring it to Kinko's, or if you're wanting to size things or fit them in to Dollar Tree foam board, you know, say all I wanted to do was bring it to Kinko's, print it, and then fit it directly on to Dollar Tree foam board. That's not how I make my templates, but you could easily just say, I think it's 30 by 20. Someone can correct me if that's wrong, but 30 by 20. There's your document, and you can fit in, you know, just whatever you want, whatever you can fit in there, print it out, and you're good to go. But that's not what I'm going to do right now. But you just use the same techniques that I've been showing you. What did I say? I said I wanted it to be 25.5 by 11. 25.5. There you go. And again, I'm going to want to draw my template. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit to make it a little bit more accurate. And when I say draw my template, I mean draw my grid. So my first one is going to be at 8.5, which is right there to there or thereabouts. It's not symmetrical, so, and I'm a little bit OCD, so I'm going to do that one more time. 8 and 8.51 all the way over to 8.51. Perfect. And then up here it's going to be 17. So I'm going to bring it to 16.99. That's fine. Over to 16.99, and we're good to go. Good to go with our template right there. Make sure I have the selector on. I'm gonna go back over here. I'm gonna grab the wing, and I'm gonna copy, paste. So there we have it right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the whole thing and I'm going to group it again because I don't want anything to mess up during the scaling. I'm going to group it. I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Scale, Scale proportionally by 150%. So it's going to scale it 150% each way. 150. I'm going to apply. Let me zoom out to see how that looks. All right, and so there we are. That's what that's going to look like. Going to look pretty good. Again, maybe let's just to demonstrate the point, bring some of these over, paste. Again, I'll group them just to make sure. Make them 150%. Looks like I can fit more. So I'm not going to do it with the rest, but it's the same deal. You were just using the transform tool and scaling everything to whatever you'd like to, actually. The key things to remember are if you're scaling, for example, oops, I didn't want to move that whole thing. Let's zoom in. You're probably going to want to move the CG. And that is actually, unfortunately, only going to happen once you have printed it out and tested everything. But say, you know, you're making this for someone else, and you want to have the CG right. I'm going to ungroup everything. Just select the CG. And you can drag it around wherever you'd like. Put it there. Put it there, wherever. The other things to be cognizant of are your cutouts for foam board, your A and B folds, your and your barbecue skewer entry points. Those aren't really a big deal. Those can be as big as you want. You're still just going to point a barbecue skewer right to the middle. But any little cutout, like right here, cutouts right here, cutouts right here, you're going to be scaling those cutouts by 150% as well. And so you're actually going to want to go back in and scale them back down. And there's a couple of ways to do that. You could go in and scale the whole thing to 150% and then come back out and scale them down by 66.6%. You can actually once you've ungrouped these things. So let's just pretend that this has already been scaled. You can go in. So it looks like I'm going to have to ungroup both of these as well, I believe. And now, looks like that was drawn in one whole thing. But you can actually scale them. So drag them this way and that. Say I guess if we're pretending that these are scaled up plans, I'd want to make them smaller by a certain amount. If you want to, you can measure what they initially were. So it's 0.17 inches is the distance of a cutout for the B fold at least. And so say that it scaled up to this and you needed to scale it back down. It's basically just trial and error. Use the select tool, scale it back down until it's about 0.17 inches, a little bit smaller, somewhere there. And you can get as exact as you want. That's probably fine, but that's just to show you, the things to remember when you are scaling things up. So what I would probably do, let's say in this situation, maybe I will, just as a for example, scale up the fuselage. And actually I'm gonna get the whole fuselage, copy, paste over here just to work with. It didn't copy the whole thing, it doesn't matter. Select everything, group together, transform by 150 and scale it proportionally. Apply that. And then what I can do, now obviously I'm gonna have to ungroup it, go back in, and move these back down to whatever they were. So I'm gonna go over to the original, zoom in, and this is, it is a little tedious, but this is kind of what has to be done, as far as I know, if you really want to, do this correctly. So you got 0.15, 0.14 for your foam board, which you're going to need to scale back down over here. So I'm going to use the select tool, and with this, because they are individual, you can just move it on down. Until they are the correct distance apart. So 0.14, pretty good. Maybe you can get a little bit more exact. Again, because this is kind of weird, you're going to have to move all this stuff down. That's actually moving it when I wanted to scale it right there. And so you're gonna have to work with it, play around with it, but that's basically what you do. One final comment that I'd make about making scaled plans is that I know that Josh Bixler over at Flite Test and many other people have kind of commented on even when they are, you know, say for example, I think when they were making the Mustang, they realized that when they scaled it down, they had to change the wing size to kind of make it look better. But you could also use the same technique if you're trying to make it perform better. So if you think you need a little more wing area, but you feel pretty good about the width of the wing, you know, from leading edge to trailing edge, you can scale it non-proportionally. So say I'm like, you know what, I need a little bit more wing area, but I don't want to make it any deeper from leading edge to trailing edge. You can just extend it. So it's already scaled to 150%. I'm going to uncheck the scale proportionally, and I'm going to say I want to make this 175%. Apply that. Oh, what that did is it applied it again. So let's say from what it is, I want to leave the width the same, and I want to make this 150% of what it was, which is actually a lot, so make it 125. And apply that. As you can see, it just extended it. It's the same depth. It just made it a little bit longer of a wing. But same tools, same techniques, and then once you've got your thing scaled and everything moved exactly where you want it, use the techniques that I had gone over previously to fit them on as low a number of sheets as possible, with cuts as convenient as you'd like, and kind of go from there. So hopefully that was helpful. If you would like, obviously comment on the video, or you can go over to the Flite Test forums. I'm going to try to post this over there and talk about it over there. So again, I hope this was helpful, and hopefully this will get you building more, building better, building faster.